Claude responded. I was eating breakfast alone at Miller's family kitchen, the same corner table I'd taken every Tuesday and Saturday morning since my wife passed. I was eating breakfast alone at Miller's family kitchen, the same corner table I'd taken every Tuesday and Saturday morning since my wife passed, when a young woman came out from the kitchen carrying a coffee pot, and I nearly dropped my fork. She was 7 months pregnant, maybe more, moving slow and careful the way women do when their bodies have stopped negotiating with them. And she was my son-in-law's wife, my daughter. The one everyone in our family had been told ran off to Nevada 18 months ago with some man from her gym. The second she saw my face, the color drained out of hers, and she turned so fast she knocked a menu off the counter. I am genuinely grateful you're spending this time with me. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from tonight? Son, daughter, friend? Tell me in the comments, because every one of you matters more than you know. One more thing before we start. Some details in this story have been shaped for the purpose of the lesson inside it. Names and places are not the point. What happened to my family, and what I learned too late, is the point. And I believe some of you need to hear it as much as I needed to live it. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 63 years old, and for 34 years I ran Higgins Sheet Metal out of a machine shop on Route 9 outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I started with 2 employees and a rented bay behind a tire shop. By the time I sold my controlling interest 4 years ago, we had built out custom HVAC ductwork for half the hospitals and school districts in 3 counties, and the company was worth more money than I ever expected to see in one lifetime. I tell you the number not to brag, but so you understand what was quietly at stake before I even knew it was being taken from me. $41 million, spread across the business sale proceeds, the real estate, and a retirement account. I'd built one paycheck at a time since I was 29 years old. My wife Carol died 3 years ago in April, a stroke that took her in 11 days from diagnosis to the funeral home, and I had not fully learned how to be a person alone in a house since. Every Tuesday and Saturday morning, I drove to Miller's family kitchen on Chestnut Street, because Carol and I had eaten breakfast there every week for almost 20 years. And some habits are the last rope you're still holding on to. I always ordered the same thing: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, bacon crisp enough to shatter. Carol always got the pancakes, even though she said every single time that she shouldn't. The waitresses at Miller's had changed over the years, but the rhythm of the place hadn't, and that rhythm was the only thing keeping some part of me tethered to the ground. That Saturday morning in late October, my hand was shaking again when I reached for my coffee cup, the same tremor that had been getting worse for 4 months. My doctor, a good man named Dr. Ferris, who'd been treating me for 11 years, had run 2 rounds of blood work and adjusted my blood pressure medication twice, and told me the dizziness and the shaking were most likely early-stage essential tremor combined with age and stress. I believed him because I wanted to believe there was a simple, boring explanation for why my body felt like it was slowly turning against me. My son-in-law, Derek Whitfield, had been remarkably attentive since Carol died. He and my daughter Emily had married 6 years earlier, and Derek had worked inside Higgins Sheet Metal for the last 5 of them, managing vendor contracts and eventually stepping into a director role I'd created for him myself, because I loved my daughter, and I wanted to believe her husband was a man worth trusting with what I'd built. 3 months ago, Derek started bringing me a thermos of coffee every morning on his way into the shop, a habit he said he'd picked up because he worried about me rattling around the house alone, drinking bad coffee by myself. I remember feeling something close to grateful. A father feeling noticed by his son-in-law is a small, warm thing, and I did not question it, because I did not want to. I was thinking about none of that when the kitchen door swung open at Miller's, and a young pregnant woman stepped through carrying a coffee pot in one hand and a rag over her shoulder, moving with the deliberate care of someone whose ankles had stopped forgiving her hours ago. She wore the standard Miller's uniform, a maroon polo, 2 sizes too loose around a belly the fabric could no longer disguise, her hair pulled back in a knot, coming apart at one side. She set down water glasses at the table beside me, without spilling a drop, her free hand resting instinctively against her stomach, the way pregnant women do, when the weight becomes its own kind of gravity. Then she turned toward the window light, and I stopped breathing. I knew that jawline. I knew the small chip in her front tooth from a bicycle accident when she was 11 years old, the one Carol used to tease her about at every family Thanksgiving. I knew my own daughter's face, even 18 months older and thinner and more tired than I had ever seen it. "Emily," I said, and the word came out of me before I had decided to say it. Quiet, but not quiet enough. Her head snapped toward me, and for one suspended second her eyes met mine, and I watched every ounce of color leave her face the way water leaves a drain. Then she turned and pushed back through the swinging kitchen door so fast the coffee pot nearly slipped from her hand. I was out of the booth before my knees had a chance to argue with me. I pushed through that swinging door after her without a single thought for the fact that customers do not belong in a diner, kitchen, that I was 63 years old, with a bad hip and a heart that had been behaving strangely for months, or that I'd left a full plate of eggs and an unfinished cup of coffee sitting at the table where Carol and I used to argue gently about whether the bacon was too salty. None of that mattered anymore. The kitchen hit me like a wall of noise and heat, the clatter of a dishwasher, the hiss of a flat-top grill, two cooks shouting order numbers back and forth over a ticket rail. I spotted Emily against the back wall near the walk-in cooler, both hands pressed flat against her belly, her chest heaving in short, panicked breaths. "Emily," I kept my voice low, the way you talk to somebody standing near an edge. "Look at me. It's just me." She shook her head hard, pressing herself back against the cooler door. "You need to go back out front, Dad. Please. I can't do this right now." "You're shaking," I said, because she was, her whole body trembling, and not from the cold of the walk-in beside her. "I'm fine," she said, her voice cracking on the second word. "I'm fine. I just need you to leave." I took one slow step closer, hands open at my sides, so she'd see I wasn't reaching for her. "I am not here to drag you back to Derek," I said. "I am not going anywhere, but I am not doing that either." That stopped her. Her breathing stayed ragged, but her eyes locked onto mine with an expression that was equal parts terror and an exhausted, desperate hope. The look of someone who has been running so long she's forgotten what stillness feels like. "Mrs. Alvarez," I said without turning, because I'd felt someone else's presence in that kitchen the moment I walked through the door. A heavy-set woman in her late 50s stepped out from behind the prep line, wiping her hands on her apron, sizing me up with the calm, fast read of someone who has broken up worse things than this in her own kitchen. "You her family?" she asked. Direct, no wasted words. "Her father," I said. She studied me 3 full seconds. Then she untied her apron, hung it on a hook by the walk-in, and said, "Come with me." Her name was Rosa Alvarez, and she'd owned Miller's family kitchen for 19 years. She led Emily and me past the dish pit and down a narrow hallway that smelled like cardboard and dried herbs, to a door I'd walked past 100 times over the years and never once wondered about. Inside was a room barely big enough for the 3 of us standing in it. A cot against one wall, made up neatly with a quilted blanket, a plastic storage bin doubling as a nightstand, holding a phone charger, a half-empty bottle of prenatal vitamins, and a small jar of lotion. A single coat hook on the wall with a winter coat and a change of clothes folded into a grocery bag. And on the pillow, a spiral notebook, its cover soft and curled from handling. I stood in that doorway for a long moment, without moving. "She came to me back in July," Rosa said from behind me, her voice matter-of-fact, in the way of someone who has decided plain facts are kinder than soft ones right now. "Knocked on my back door at 6 in the morning asking if I needed any help in the kitchen. I could see she was pregnant. I asked how far along. She said almost 5 months. Rosa paused. She'd been sleeping in her car for 2 weeks before that. The air went out of my lungs. "In July," I said, my voice coming out strange and thin. "In July," Rosa confirmed. "I gave her the room. I gave her the job. She works hard. Never complains. Never asks for more than she's earned." She looked at Emily, not at me, when she said the rest, and she made me swear not to tell a soul she was here. Emily had lowered herself onto the edge of the cot, one hand pressed against her lower back, staring at a fixed spot on the floor, her jaw tight, her eyes red but dry, like a woman who had already spent every tear she had a long time ago. "Emily," I said, and my voice broke somewhere in the middle of her name. "You slept in your car. Pregnant. I was okay," she said quietly. "The car had heat. That is not what I'm asking. I said, and you know it. She finally looked up at me. What do you want me to say, Dad? That I should have called you? Maybe I should have. But I didn't have anywhere Derek couldn't find me, and I couldn't risk him knowing about the baby. Not until I had enough. Enough what? I asked. She reached over and picked up the spiral notebook from the pillow, holding it against her chest with both hands, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Enough to protect us both, she said. I looked at that notebook, and then at her face, the shadows carved under her eyes, the deliberate straightness of her spine, even through the exhaustion written into every line of her. And I understood, slowly, that I was looking at the bravest thing my daughter had ever done, and I had spent 18 months believing she'd simply left. Emily, I said, what did Derek do that made you run? Her chin lifted. Her eyes met mine with a steadiness that clearly cost her something. He didn't do anything loud, Dad, she said. He just changed the locks while I was at a doctor's appointment, left a box of my things on the porch and a note saying the marriage was over and I shouldn't contact any of you again. He told us you left, I said. He told the whole family you left for another man. She nodded slowly, like she'd already rehearsed hearing this. I know what he told you, she said, and I know you believed him. I don't blame you. He's good at being believed. She opened the notebook and turned it toward me, her finger resting on the first line of small, careful handwriting. Because I knew someday somebody was going to need to read this, she said. Rosa quietly pulled the door shut behind her, and the kitchen noise faded to a low hum through the thin wall. I dragged the room's single folding chair over and sat facing Emily, close enough that our knees nearly touched. Start from the beginning, I said. Not for me, for you. Say it out loud to someone who's actually listening this time. It didn't happen all at once, she began, her voice low and careful, like she was carrying something fragile across a room. That's the hardest part to explain. You don't wake up one day and realize your husband has become someone else. It happens in pieces so small you talk yourself out of every one of them. She told me it started with small financial things 2 years ago. Derek asking her to sign documents she didn't fully read because he was in a hurry, and she trusted him. Then it became him controlling every account, telling her the business needed the flexibility, telling her she didn't understand the complexities of running a company the way he did. Then it became isolation, slowly cutting her off from her college friends, discouraging visits to my house, always with a reasonable-sounding excuse. Then, 4 months into her pregnancy, she'd found a printed bank statement in his gym bag showing wire transfers to an LLC she'd never heard of, and when she asked him about it, calmly, not accusing him of anything, just asking, his whole face had changed in a way that frightened her more than anything he could have said. 2 days later, she came home from an OB appointment, and her key didn't work. I sat with that in silence for a long moment, feeling something in my chest that was equal parts grief and a cold, clarifying anger I hadn't felt in years. Emily, I said finally, I need you to tell me what's in that notebook. She opened it to the middle and turned it toward me. Pages of dates, dollar amounts, account numbers copied by hand from documents she must have photographed or memorized in fragments over months. 14 transfers, she said, all out of Higgins Sheet Metal's vendor account, into 3 shell companies. I don't know everything, Dad, but I know it's been going on for at least 18 months, and I know he's been the only signatory who could move that money without triggering a review, because he's the one who set up the review process himself 2 years ago. The review process I'd approved myself, trusting him, because he was my daughter's husband, and I had wanted, so badly, for that to be enough. That night I drove home the long way, past the old machine shop on Route 9 where I'd hauled my first sheet metal order in a borrowed truck, past the church where Carol and I got married in 1986, past the elementary school where Emily had won the 3rd grade spelling bee, and I'd stood at the back of the gymnasium so full of pride I could barely breathe. I was looking for the thread, the place where the boy I remembered turned into the man capable of erasing his pregnant wife from the family and helping himself to a business built, one contract at a time, over 3 decades. I did not find it on Route 9. I sat in my driveway a long time before going inside. Then I went to the guest room where Derek and Emily used to stay when they visited, sat down at the small desk in the corner, and opened the bottom drawer, the one that stuck, because something had been nagging at me since the diner, and I finally understood what it was. 3 months ago, when Derek's morning coffee deliveries had started, my dizziness had gotten sharply worse. I found an old prescription bottle in that drawer, one Dr. Ferris had switched me off of back in the spring, and sitting behind it, tucked flat against the wood, an insurance document I did not remember signing. I unfolded it under the desk lamp. A beneficiary amendment on my life insurance policy, filed 4 months earlier, increasing the payout to $12 million, with Derek listed as primary beneficiary in the event Emily could not be located to claim her share. I sat there a long time with my palms flat on the desk, looking at that paper until my eyes ached, thinking about a boy who used to help me sweep metal shavings off the shop floor on Saturday mornings when he was still just Emily's college boyfriend, before any of us understood what he'd eventually become. The next morning I called Dr. Ferris myself and asked him, plainly, if there was any way to test whether something in my system besides age was causing the tremor and the dizziness. He ran a full toxicology panel that afternoon, and 2 days later he called me into his office and closed the door before he sat down, which told me everything before he said a word. "Walter," he said, choosing his words with the care of a man who understood exactly what he was about to change in my life. "What we found in your blood work is consistent with prolonged, low-dose exposure to a heavy metal compound. This isn't natural decline. This is something someone has been giving you." The room was very quiet. Outside, a delivery truck idled somewhere in the parking lot. "How long?" I asked. "Based on the concentration," he said, "I'd estimate 3 to 4 months of steady exposure." "Since the coffee started," I said, mostly to myself. He looked at me steadily. "Walter, I have reporting obligations here." "I understand," I said. "I'm not asking you to bury it. I'm asking for 72 hours before anything becomes official. I have evidence I need to put together, and I need to do it carefully, because the man doing this to me is still inside my company, and my daughter is hiding from him 7 months pregnant, and I am not going to move until I know exactly how to protect her." He studied me a long moment, then nodded once. 72 hours, he said. "Not because I'm comfortable with it, because I trust you know what you're doing." I called a private investigator that same afternoon, a retired state trooper named Gary Pruitt I'd used once years earlier during a supplier dispute. "I need surveillance, starting tomorrow morning," I told him. "My son-in-law, Derek Whitfield, and a woman I believe is named Nicole Sarkis, someone in the shop had mentioned to me once in passing, as Derek's new hire in accounts payable, a woman none of us had ever properly met. I want to know everywhere they go and everyone they meet." "Timeline," Gary said. 72 hours to start," I told him. Same rate as before. The next morning I drove to see Paula Winters, a forensic accountant who'd done an internal audit for Higgins sheet metal 5 years earlier and found $60,000 in duplicated vendor payments inside of a week. I laid Emily's notebook on her desk, along with Dr. Ferris's preliminary lab report, and told her everything I knew. She listened without looking up from her keyboard, her fingers moving fast, until she stopped typing entirely. "Walter," she said, "come look at this." She had 14 wire transfers laid out on her screen, dates and amounts and destination accounts, each one routed into one of 3 shell LLCs registered within a 6-week window 18 months earlier. The registered agent on all 3 was a woman named Carla Sarkis, Nicole's mother, Paula said. 72 years old, living in Erie. I'd bet a great deal of money she has no idea her name is on any of this. The person who actually controls all 3 accounts, the primary signatory on every operating agreement, is Nicole Sarkis herself. "Derek signed the transfer authorizations on our end," Paula said. "But the structure here, the shell companies, the use of a relative's name as a paper front, this has been done before by someone who knew exactly what they were doing." 2 days later, Gary Pruitt called to tell me Derek had been circling the extended stay motel on Route 22, the one closest to Miller's family kitchen, twice in one afternoon. "He doesn't have the room number," Gary said, "but he knows she's close, and men like this don't stop looking once they're that close." My phone buzzed on the counter, 30 seconds later. A text from Emily. "He drove past twice. I saw the truck. I don't think he saw me, but I'm scared." I called her immediately and told her to lock the door, put the chain on, and not open it for anyone but me. "I'm on my way," I said, and I meant it in every sense a person can mean those words. I drove straight to Miller's, and Rosa let me in through the back without a word. walking me down that same narrow hallway to the storage room where Emily sat on the edge of the cot, both arms wrapped around her belly, her breathing too fast, too shallow. "Something's wrong," she said the moment she saw my face, her voice thin with fear that had nothing to do with Derek anymore. "I've been having pains since this morning." I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to be a burden. I just wanted to keep working until I didn't let her finish. I got her into my truck and drove her straight to Harrisburg General, running 2 yellow lights. I would not have run for anything less than my daughter and my grandchild. And by the time the doctors got her settled and monitored, they told us both plainly that she was in early labor, 5 weeks ahead of her due date, and that they intended to keep her exactly where she was. I sat in that hospital hallway most of the night, the accordion folder of evidence Paula had assembled sitting closed on the chair beside me, my phone buzzing every hour or two, with updates from Gary Pruitt, watching the 2 threats to my family converge at the exact same moment, one closing in from the parking lot of a motel and the other closing in from inside my daughter's own body. At 4 in the morning, Gary called to tell me Nicole Sarkis had booked a one-way flight to Tampa, leaving from Harrisburg International at 7:40, and that Derek had been seen loading 2 suitcases into his truck an hour earlier. They were running. I called Detective Renee Ashcraft, a friend of Paula's from the District Attorney's Financial Crimes Unit, who'd reviewed our documentation the day before and told us plainly it was clean enough to act on immediately. I told her everything Gary had just told me. She didn't hesitate. "Stay where you are, Mr. Higgins," she said. "We'll take it from here." They picked Nicole Sarkis up at the gate at 7 to 10, 2 checked bags, and a laptop already flagged for forensic review. They picked Derek up 40 minutes later in the parking lot of his own apartment complex, his truck still running, both suitcases already loaded, a hospital visitor's log later confirming he had never once come to see his own child born. Detective Ashcraft called me herself just after 9 that morning. "Both of them are in custody, Mr. Higgins," she said. "The DA's office is going to want a full statement from you this week, but I want you to know the documentation your accountant put together is as clean as anything I've seen in a long time. This isn't going to be complicated. I did this late," I told her. "Better late than never," she said, and something in the way she said it let me set down a weight I'd been carrying since the moment I first saw my daughter's face through that kitchen door. I was back at the hospital by 10. Emily was sitting up in bed, a tiny boy against her chest, his face turned into her neck, both of them existing in that particular piece of 2 people who have been through something together and come out the other side. "How did it go?" she asked, the moment I walked in. "Derek's in custody," I said. "Nicole, too. They were caught trying to leave the state this morning. It's over, Emily. It's actually over." She closed her eyes, opened them again, her chin trembling once before she pressed her lips together and held it steady. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." I pulled a chair to the side of her bed and sat down. The baby stirred slightly, a tiny fist opening and closing against her shoulder. "There's something I want to ask you," I said. "You don't have to answer today. You don't have to answer at all if you're not ready." She looked at me, waiting. "I want to make sure you and this baby never have to wonder again whether you have a place," I said. "Not just in my house, in my will, in the company, in everything I built. Your mother would have wanted that. But more than that, I want it because you are the reason I found out the truth before it killed me. And you deserve to know this family is yours as much as it is mine." Emily looked down at her son for a long moment. When she looked back up, her eyes were full, but it was a different kind of full than the fear I'd seen in that storage room. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that very much, Dad." Winter came late to Harrisburg that year. The first hard frost didn't settle over the yard until the 2nd week of December, and even then the maple out front held onto its last few leaves, stubbornly, gold and curled, refusing to let go until a Tuesday morning in mid-month when I noticed, making coffee at the kitchen window, that they'd finally come down overnight. It struck me that I hadn't paid attention to those leaves changing in 3 full years, not since Carol died. I had been too busy quietly disappearing into my own grief and my own routines to notice anything that was simply, patiently happening around me. The legal proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. Derek pleaded guilty to fraud, theft by deception, and criminal poisoning. and received 19 years, eligible for parole after 14. Nicole Sarkis, whose prior business history in 2 other states the DA's office had reopened based on Paula's documentation, received 11 years on compounded fraud and conspiracy charges. I did not attend either sentencing. I stayed home with my grandson, a boy Emily named Carl, after her mother, and I have never once regretted that choice. The second week of January, I drove out to Miller's family kitchen on a quiet Wednesday afternoon after the lunch rush had cleared out. Rosa was behind the counter restocking the pie case. She set down the pie server and waited while I took a stool, not the corner booth, not that day, and put both hands flat on the counter. "I owe you something I don't know how to properly repay," I told her. "You gave my daughter a place to sleep when she had nowhere else. You gave her work when she needed to feel like she could still stand on her own. You kept her safe for 4 months, without knowing who I was, or whether any of it would ever matter to anyone but her." Rosa looked at me with the steady, unsentimental expression of a woman who'd run a diner for 19 years and stopped being surprised by what walked through her door a long time ago. "She's a good person," Rosa said simply. "You don't need a reason beyond that." "No," I said, "you don't, but I have one anyway." I set a sealed envelope on the counter between us. "It's a purchase offer for this building, full market value, independently appraised, with a lifetime management agreement attached. You run this place exactly as you always have, for as long as you want to. Nothing changes except who holds the deed. And you never have to worry again about some landlord deciding to sell the building out from under you." She looked at the envelope, then at me. "How did you know I was renting?" she asked. "I asked around," I said. She picked it up, turned it over once in her hands, and set it back down without opening it. "I'll have my nephew look at it," she said. "He's a paralegal. That's all I'm asking," I told her. She poured me a cup of coffee, the real kind, and slid it across the counter, and I drank it slowly, and it was the best cup of coffee I'd had in a very long time, which I understood had less to do with the coffee itself and more to do with the fact that I could drink it without wondering, even for a second, what might be in it. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday, Emily's father-in-law from her first marriage, an old friend of Carol's named Doug, drove up from Maryland with his wife Patty, 2 casserole dishes, and a hand-knit blanket for the baby, the particular energy of people who'd worried about someone for a long time and were only now allowing themselves to believe the worry was finally over. I sat in my own backyard that afternoon with Carl asleep against my chest, 5 weeks old, his small face turned toward the weak January sun, and Emily sat in the chair beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her shoulder near mine without either of us needing to say anything about it. I had spent 34 years building a company out of sheet metal and contracts and handshake deals, out of things made of steel and paper, and I had believed, without ever quite saying it out loud, that this was what a life was built from, that this was what would last. But the boy sleeping against my chest weighed 7 pounds and carried a name that connected him to a grandmother he would never meet. And he was, at 5 weeks old, already looking at the world with the plain, unearned trust of someone who had arrived already knowing exactly where home was. "Carol," I said quietly, to no one in particular, and to her specifically, "I think I finally understand what you spent all those years trying to tell me. Looking back now on everything that happened, there's one simple truth it took me 63 years to fully understand. You can build a fortune with your hands and still lose everything that matters if you're not paying attention to the people standing right in front of you. I am not proud of the father I was in the years before this happened. I gave my daughter every material thing except the one thing she actually needed, which was my full and constant attention. I was present in the house, but I was not always present in the room, and I have come to believe that the people we love learn to stop asking for what we never think to offer. I do not believe this story is about anger, even though anger is a part of it. I believe it is about what happens when love shows up late and justice shows up just in time, and about how close those two things can come to missing each other entirely. If any part of what happened to me and to my daughter feels familiar to you, tell me in the comments what you would have done differently, because I still ask myself that question most nights. Share this with someone in your life who needs to hear it. And if this kind of story has earned a place in your week, stay with me, because I have more of them to tell, and I am grateful, more than I know how to say, For every single one of you who stayed until the very end, Claude responded. Sometimes the people quietly holding your family together aren't the ones with your last name. They're the ones who show up with a coffee pot and a spare cot W. Sometimes the people quietly holding your family together aren't the ones with your last name. They're the ones who show up with a coffee pot and a spare cot when nobody's watching. Notice them. Thank them. And never let a full house make you forget to actually look at the people sitting in it. Because attention, not money, is the thing that tells someone they're truly loved. A gentle note for you: this story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though I hope the heart of its lesson still landed somewhere real.